So I need everybody's attention, all that good energy, all that woo that I heard, because this is Jeff G's first talk ever at WordCamp, and he's kicking things off, yeah, right, like a boss, right here on the main stage. Mad respect. So he's going to take us on a ride through real-world accessibility, and not the checkbox type of accessibility, the actual like human experience type. So his talk is the accessibility in reality, and it is built around a Swiss case study that will open your eyes, maybe make you laugh, and will definitely make you think. So it's about 30 minutes straight, so there's not going to be any QA here, but again, at the WP Cafe. It's all good vibes, you know, it's got story, it's got heart, and it's got a healthy dose of making you think, wait, why aren't we doing this already? So let's give a warm welcome to Jeff G.
Thanks. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah, everything's working perfectly fine. Okay, let's start just with the question. Hands up, anyone, who of you here feels really, really confident about the topic of web accessibility? Yeah, okay, I'm happy, I'm really, really proud of you, but all the rest, don't worry, me neither. Before I tell you who I am, I want to tell you who I am not, because I am not an accessibility expert. It is not my main job. I don't have any accessibility certifications like IAAP CPACC, or IAAP WAS, or IAAP CPWA. I am not eligible to do the BIK BATY tests or the WCHG tests. I am not an expert on all the laws, I'm afraid. I can't tell you everything about EAA, EN 301-549, BGG, and so on. And sadly, I don't know all the differences between WCHG 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, and 3.0 by heart. And I am not someone who has ever spoken in front of such a large crowd before, so thank you for showing up today. Okay, I wouldn't mind if some of you would now be thinking, great, this guy does not know anything about accessibility and getting up to leave the room. What's the point of his talk? Well, my name is Jeff, and I'm a front-end developer, like I suppose many of you, or most of you, or some of you. And I said I'm not an expert, but I do have a lot of expertise, actually. I took a lot of accessibility courses, attended quite a few accessibility conferences, and read countless accessibility articles. And most importantly, I do have practical accessibility experience from building websites for over 10 years that are accessible. Starting back when most people did not even know yet what A11Y stands for. I guess most of you know that it stands for A11 letters Y, and who didn't know knows now. You see, making a website accessible in 2025 is the same for me as making it responsive. It is not an extra feature. Accessibility should be one of a website's basic functionalities. If I would go and build an inaccessible website on purpose, I would technically build a defunct website. And what kind of web developer would I be to do this? So, that means that all of my websites pass WCHG AA and AAA criteria at first try, right? I would like that very much, but I highly doubt it. And still, I'm quite certain that my websites cover a lot of aspects that 96% of all other websites don't, this being the percentage of websites that don't have any form of accessibility treatment at all. There is a blog post accompanying this talk where you can find all the additional links and sources, and you find it using this QR code, or just head over to required.com and check it out on the blog. So what is our plan for the next 30 minutes? Well, I don't want to bore you. I don't want to give you the usual accessibility keynote and talk about why accessibility matters, or why it does not only mean screen readers for blind people, or why it would add great revenue to include people with accessibility in your target audience, or why we shouldn't just exclude 16% of the population from the internet, this being the percentage of people living with a disability of some sort. No, you have all heard talks like this before. In the next 30 minutes, I want this talk to have a slightly different focus. And I'm going to ask you again, are some of you scared of the matter of web accessibility? You can be honest with me. Is somebody out there who feels a little bit about the topic? You can be honest, but I know that don't worry, because I know I was scared as well before I started getting more comfortable with the topic. Because you see, being scared with the topic doesn't make much sense, actually, because this fear of not doing web accessibility perfectly stops you from starting with small improvements that already would be way better than doing nothing. So you should forget these useless fears, because every decision that makes a website more accessible is already a real improvement for the real people using it. And every small problem solved is a big step in the right direction. And in this talk today, I'm going to show you 10 examples of such big, small improvements that we made for a real website and a real client. And I hope you will see that there is nothing really to be scared about. There is nothing required of you that you won't be able to do as front-end developers anyways, because even I can do it, and I'm not even a trained programmer. I was a comic artist before I started building websites. So, one last thing before we start with the examples. All of you made one very smart choice regarding accessibility, and that is choosing WordPress as your CMS. Out of the box, the blog editor is highly accessible, thanks to the great accessibility team that constantly improves the code base. For example, last Thursday, right here at Contributor Day. Yes, I see someone around here. So a lot of things already work out of the box, that is, until we start adding our own code and making it worse somehow. So now, let's take a look at what I brought with me today. I am part of Required, a Switzerland-based WordPress agency with over 15 years of experience and a history of WordPress and WordCamp contributions. So I am very proud to continue this legacy with my first talk here at WordCamp Europe in Basel. For the special occasion of WordCamp Europe coming to Switzerland for the first time, I chose a truly Swiss project as our hands-on accessibility example, the relaunch of ProHelvetia.ch. ProHelvetia is the federal institution for the sponsorship and development of Swiss-based arts and culture and international cooperations. What does that mean? That means if you're a musician or part of a dance group or even a comic artist like me, and you are looking for someone to support your project related to Switzerland, ProHelvetia is your address. They also run worldwide cooperations from their offices in 7 countries on 4 continents. And the relaunch of this website was a big project involving 5 different organizations working it for over a whole year. And our role at Required was web development based on the existing WordPress installation. We worked in close coordination with the design agency and with ProHelvetia as a mutual client. And speaking of multiple parties involved in the project, I told you that I would not call myself an expert on accessibility earlier. So in this project, who can be the accessibility experts? Imagine the following scenario. You get a call from your mother, and she calls you that her washing machine is broken. So what do? Okay, I admit I would probably spend a whole day with lots of Googling and multiple trips to the hardware store, making the problem way worse than it was before. But all of you smart people in the audience, I know you would just go call an expert. And we did exactly that. Access for all. That's also a nice slogan for this talk, don't you think? Access for All, which is their English name, is a Swiss non-profit organization with the goal to make the internet more accessible. They offer website reviews on the basis of WCHG 2.1 and 2.2 AA level, which is the standard many international laws use, like the European Accessibility Act. Their reviews are done by experts, both disabled and non-disabled. And what comes in very practical, they will adapt to your budget, reviewing whole multi-site applications or just a few hours for your initial designs. Because, to quote them with their own words, a few hours can already be enough to identify the main barriers of a project. Anyone can buy such a review, and so did our client Pro Helvetia. It was their own wish to make their new website as accessible as possible right from the start. And now let's take a look at this website. Learning by doing it wrong. When you order an accessibility review from Access for All, you receive a PDF document like this. And I found that fixing all the errors they found not only improves your website, but also teaches you a lot about web accessibility in general. Today, as I said, I brought with me 10 examples from this Pro Helvetia accessibility review that I will lay out for you in the following structure: problem, solution, learning. This will be the structure for our next 15 minutes and the main part of this talk. Some of the following issues might seem small and unimpactful, but keep in mind that these are real problems on a real website. This hopefully will also show you that accessibility isn't that scary at all. So let's just start with something easy. Number one, wrong alt text for linked logo. And now I quote directly from the accessibility review where it says, the linked site logo must have an alternative text that reflects the dual function of the logo, conveying the sender's identity and indicating the destination of the link. And this is how it was, the Pro Helvetia logo with an alt text saying logo of Pro Helvetia and an anchor element with a link to the homepage around it. Both not wrong, but a mistake when you combine them like this. Because the screen reader will actually say link logo of Pro Helvetia. And this does not tell you that the link is going to the homepage, but instead you might even think it leads to a raw logo file. Solution, and that's the cool thing. The cool thing is Access for All, they do not only provide you with all the places where you should fix accessibility barriers, but they also suggest solutions themselves. And in this case, it suggested adding the string back to homepage to the logo's alt text. This is a very good solution. We chose another one that also works. We added an ARIA label attribute to the anchor element saying return to homepage of Pro Helvetia. And then we left the alt attribute of the image intentionally empty because the screen reader will always prefer the ARIA label on the anchor element, ignoring the logo's alt text. Both of these solutions work perfectly fine in this case. And we learn images need alt texts and link need link texts. Linked images might serve as link texts. That wasn't that bad, was it? So we continue with example number 2, lists with only one item. The link find support is implemented as a list with only one entry. And as you can see, there is a big prominent call to action button in the main navigation, and this used to be just a singular list item inside an unordered list element. A structure like this will prompt the screen reader to announce a lot of unnecessary text. It will say link, find support, list, one object, and when you go over this over and over and over, it will just be very tiresome. The reason is, initially, we rendered this button with the WordPress function WP-nav menu because we implemented this link as a WordPress menu in the dashboard so that it could be set from the dashboard. But WP-nav menu will always render an unordered list regardless of the number of items. So solution, instead of using WP-nav menu, we now retrieve the menu items with wp-get-nav menu items. And then we wrap them manually inside block editor markup. This way, by calling doBlocks, we can render the link just like a button inserted with the buttons block from the block editor. Don't worry, all this stuff will also be the code in the blog post. Learning. Don't use lists if there is nothing to list. Makes sense. Or number 3, grouped inputs missing label. The problem, the frequently searched terms are visually grouped with the heading suggestions. But this is not formatted as a legend to a field set. We are talking about the search modal. There are these handy search suggestions we can click on. They are labeled as suggestions, but this relation is not that obvious in the source code. We just have a paragraph element followed by an unordered list of inputs. Solution is a very simple improvement we can do here. We just replace the div with a field set and a paragraph with a legend. You don't have to change anything else from the structure, just adjusting basic browser CSS styles for these two new elements. And we learn Ps don't label anything, but legends label field sets. This finding is also a great segue into the topic of HTML semantics, which is the topic of our next example, number 4. It says, text not semantically structured. The problem? Some texts are not correctly integrated into the HTML structure, but only via div and span. In the footer, you see an area where information can be put out that was also entered in the dashboard. And as you can see in the source code, the text was rendered directly inside a div element, but a div is merely a structural element. It has no meaning on its own. So it's actually unclear to screen readers what the purpose of this text is. This is because in our Pro Helvetia template, we echoed this text simply using the NL2BR function, converting line breaks from the input field to BR elements in the front end. But obviously, that was not enough. Solution, replacing this NL2BR function with WordPress WP AutoP function renders the text correctly as a paragraph element with BRs inside. This tells the screen reader that this is general text that is meant to be read by the users. And we learn divs and spans have no semantical meaning. Always try to find the correct elements to structure your information, like P, block quote, address, and so on. This is a great example of how the practical findings from an accessibility review can lead you to learn important accessibility lessons. If you were not familiar with the topic of HTML semantics before, this is a great hint to look into it. Number 5, already starting to be halfway through here, wrong heading hierarchy. Problem: the newsletter registration and the footer content are visually clearly separated, but semantically subordinate to the last preceding heading to which they do not belong. What do they mean? On the homepage, there is a news section called What's On with recent posts, followed by pre-footer area with a newsletter registration form. But when we examine the heading structure for this page, we stumble upon a problem. The page has a general H1, followed by an H2 for What's On, and then individual H3s for all the single news posts. But the last entry actually says stay up to date and is not for a news post. No, this is the heading for the newsletter registration form. So, solution, just change this heading from H3 to H2. We can do so directly in the block editor. There, we can also make sure that the heading does not change its appearance and looks the same as it did before. Learning, always check your headings in the context of the whole page. Separate visual presentation from structural hierarchy. This is a mistake that many designers make. Just because a heading has to look smaller does not mean that simply assign it to a lower heading level. Number 6, current menu item not marked. Problem: elements that are clearly highlighted as active must also be recognizable as such using a screen reader. In the header, we can find this quick navigation that allows us to directly jump to certain pages. And we can see the currently active page is highlighted with a dark background. But if we are not able to see this dark background, we won't get this information. So, solution, adding ARIA current page to the active menu item. This way, the screen reader will know to read it out as current page. And we learn, always ask yourself, how will this element behave on a text-only level when I can't see it? Number 7, button has no meaningful description. The button for triggering the search is labeled send, which is not useful. We can go to the search modal, and when you open it, you see nothing unusual. There is a search field with a search button. But we only know that this is a search button because we can identify this magnifying glass icon. The hidden screen reader text just used to say submit. And so it is not clear from this button alone what this form will actually do. Solution, just changing this text to search. Or if you're pretty cheeky marketing-wise, find. And the learning, label your interactive elements with words that describe what they actually do, and look out for hidden stuff. Because in this case, we obviously did not mean to wrongly label the search button like this. But because it was hidden text, it was very easy to forget about it during development. Number 8, nearing the end already, visible outline missing. Problem. Keyboard focus is not visible for the two dropdowns, discipline and activity. On the homepage, there are two dropdowns to search for funding opportunities. They are placed on a pink background. This leads to a problem because the default focus style for the whole website is a pink outline, which won't be visible in this case. And solution, we changed the outline color to black for the dropdown elements. And when we interact with the dropdown, it gets a black background. So in these cases, we had to switch the outline color to white. This again was not a deliberate mistake, but also an oversight, because this filter element on the homepage was added later during development when the outline styles were already globally defined. So we learn, when we define focus styles, we need to test them for all cases and all elements. And when we add new elements, we need to test if the existing focus styles still work. Number 9, announcing filter results to screen readers. Problem. If the adjustment of the filter dropdowns leads to an automatic update of the number of results, screen reader users must be informed of this. On the Find Support page, we can dynamically filter through all the funding opportunities. And as we can see here, there used to be 100 formats, and then after filtering, the number is updated to 20. This updated number is easy for us to notice if we are visual users. But if we rely on a screen reader, it is way harder to know that something actually changed and what kind of changes there are. This problem now, in theory, would be a way bigger challenge to solve than the previous ones, because we now would need JavaScript to solve it. But remember in the beginning how I applauded you for choosing WordPress as your CMS? The solution is very simple. Just import the package WordPress Accessibility into your project from the vast repository of pre-built WordPress utility JavaScript modules. This way, we easily implement a so-called live region, and there we can announce updates to the screen reader, simply by calling a function named speak. And we learn, when you do client-side modifications with JavaScript, announce what you are changing to screen reader users. And in complex cases, look for pre-built utilities. Now, for the end, number 10, our last example, I have a small bonus category, and I called it I Told You So. Because, as I told you earlier, the design for this new Pro Helvetia website was done by an external design agency, even though UX and web design are also a part of our portfolio as required. And of course, we gave our input during this complex design phase, but when many parties are involved and a lot of different opinions meet each other, not every expertise will always be taken into consideration, and some arguments might get lost in the shuffle. Maybe you know what I'm getting at here. I want to show you some examples where mistakes could already have easily been avoided during the design phase before development even began. Like here in 10.1, where it says, inconsistent header navigation, problem. In the service navigation, there sometimes is an entry, find support, and sometimes not. Well, you're already familiar with this call to action button in the main navigation. But actually, this button would not be visible if you were on the home page. Why? Well, if I had to guess, to make the website look cleaner. But you see, changes to main navigation elements are highly confusing for people who have trouble orienting themselves on a complex website. Here we're not only talking about visually disabled people, but also persons with learning disabilities or concentration issues. Solution: just always display the button. Learning: don't change main navigation elements when there is no need to. Makes sense, doesn't it? Or 10.2, everyone's favorite and most preventable mistake, color contrast. I guess this is the web barrier that most of you are familiar with. It's a big topic in web development, and still it gets done wrong so often. It says, problem, in some cases, the contrast ratio is insufficient, for example, in the error messages for the newsletter form. And that's true. As you can see, red text on white background can be pretty hard to read. Fortunately, this is very easy to solve. Solution: just changing the color to a darker tone of red. Or in another example, problem: in some cases, the contrast ratio drops to an inadequate 2.4 to 1, and it needs to be 4.5 to 1 for WCHG 2.0 AA level. I guess even on this video screen, you will notice right away that this pink color on blue background is pretty hard to read. Solution: changing the colors again. The nice side effect here is that the designers now had to think of another way to structure the information, since they no longer could use different colors. And if you ask me, this new outcome looks way better than the previous version. One last example for today. Problem: the pink color does not work with white text where the contrast ratio is insufficient at 2.8 to 1. We all know this button by now. We've seen it multiple times. And maybe you already thought the whole time that it's also not that easy to read, right? So what did we do here? We also, again, changed the color to a different shade of pink, right? That would be the sensible choice, to actually change this color here. Yes, that would be like this. But no, instead of changing this color, somebody looked at all the different metrics and calculated that the contrast might just barely be enough if we use bold text. So now, every time we show white text on pink background, we need to set the font weight to bold. And suddenly, it's no problem to read it anymore. So, learning: listen to the people who did this before. Sometimes changes during development might come too late for crucial design choices. What can we learn from the process of working with an accessibility review? When multiple parties are involved in a project, this often leads to discussions on how things should be done. An accessibility review ends all conflicts. What the experts suggest should be the way to go. A review mainly not fixes errors, but also oversights. Most of the findings I showed you here were not results of us not knowing better, but natural mistakes. These always occur the longer and more complex a development phase becomes. We can learn a lot just from doing. Instead of being paralyzed before beginning a project, we can simply start building our code and let it be reviewed by true experts. The more reviews we read, the more knowledge we will get, and the more confident we will be in future projects. In fact, we at Required found this so helpful that after the Pro Helvetia project, we ordered a website review for our own website, required.com, to see where we can improve. To-do lists are great, and there is nothing more satisfying than slowly checking all the marks. So the list Access for All created for us was the perfect format to improve our project. Nobody is perfect, and nobody is building perfect websites out of the box, especially in such a hot and changing field like web accessibility. But trying to improve every day and getting a little better project by project is the least we can do. I will continue to do so and hope you will start doing so too. Thank you for taking your time to listen to my first ever WordCamp talk. I hope you had 2 great days here in Basel. I know I had a lot of fun with you, and I wish you a great last evening of WordCamp Europe. See you at the after party.